Normal audit for a house of 1,800, 2,000 square feet is about $150. They offered it for $50, and we had 8 folks sign up for it.
That's
night,
great.
so, which is good. And to be, not to necessarily refer to your housing study, but this has been a bit of a problem in Dorset, quite honestly.
Mhm.
Is getting people to step up and do this work. Some people really need it, have not had the background or felt comfortable putting up their hand to go out and to reach to either their neighbor works, or there's an Brock in
Bennington Rutland Opportunity.
this guy right here. And we'll talk about it when we're in Energy Fair, but they now have, at all the regional commissions, there's a person now who's been hired to be a counselor. So if somebody you know of
Because
interested
Brock
in it.
is, with pretty high income levels, you can have, all this work can be free.
for free. It's just that people don't know how to take advantage of it, or don't have the wherewithal to do it. So the counselor will work them through the paperwork, sit down with them one-on-one, and also figure out whatever the financial arrangement is.
Because the money is so frequently a concern, but at the same time, even for, for a lot of these things, doing it really will save more money than it's gonna cost. You get incentives from Efficiency Vermont for doing a bunch of this work. And there are people like, some of the Vermont banks actually provide really, attractive loans to where your savings should end up paying back the loan, and then, when it's paid off, you just keep saving.
They even now, with certain income levels, have a 5-year, not only just for thermal work, insulation type work, but furnace replacements, heat pump hot water stuff, a 5-year, no interest loan.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
Right. It was extremely easy.
Yeah. So anyways, just trying to help people get educated and see what's out there. So there are 2 other sort of items. One is, last year there was a bill passed that was labeled Act 172. And what it is about $40-ish million were put aside for any town in Vermont who would like to get involved in auditing, renovating or upgrading their thermal shell, and then electrifying if they want to get involved. If it has to be a municipally owned building. So I've been following it all last year, and it was supposed to start this past summer. Didn't quite get organized. It's sort of a normal bureaucracy problem. The first stage of it has just become available as a process that you have to go through. We've decided, and Rob met with us just recently, in Dorset, I think we only have 2 choices left, because this building apparently, somewhere along the line, in the next year, 2, 3 years, whatever, is going to go away or not be our town hall, leaves the 2 firehouses.
Mm-hmm.
So we have just applied for the first step, which is what they call it's a 4,000 mini grant. This is free money to use to educate the public and those who are interested in helping us follow through with this as to the availability of this whole project. Most people don't even know it exists.
Right.
I've been working with some other energy committees because I've always had this nervous feeling that, $40 million when you talk about every potential town in the state doesn't go very far, and probably what's going to happen is it can be up to $500,000 per town. Well, I can see a few larger entities grabbing a lot of this money quicker than we will. So I've sort of been working with Arlington and Sunderland, Manchester, and ourselves to kind of be as ready as possible to go through each one of these steps. So I just wanted to I don't know whether you all are aware of it, but this is a possibility for both those buildings. And so what it would entail after the $4,000 thing and maybe some town meetings either here or at the 2 firehouses over the next few months, just to get people on track as to what's going on. We fortunately, in both those buildings years ago, I don't remember, maybe Rob would remember, 10, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, I don't know, it's been a little while. Both of them had a fairly good, a fair great amount of insulation work done in both cases. I don't think I know that I'll call it the regular Dorset, the Route 30 Dorset firehouse, I already paid for another audit because I wanted to see where that building was, because it has 3 overhead doors, which made me nervous. Came out in the audit very well, so I don't think we're gonna have to worry about the insulation part. So the next step in my mind is the electrification of heat pumps for thermal and heat pumps for hot water and that kind of thing. So we'll try and do the same thing here over on this side, and we'll find out what we're up to there.
But that could also tie in with the education thing. If we do some of that work, then could actually, send out flyers and stuff and have people maybe see what some of the work,
Yeah, so these things we've been talking about, we were talking about a firehouse, but this applies to your home. I mean, it's all the same
Yep.
stuff.
Mhm.
So this is another way, if we can get people to come to those, can we push the needle a little bit further along? And then I did put in, I think into your guys' thing, a little thing, if you're not aware, and I have to say, I'm not sure it's still going, but 2 weeks ago it was.
the,
A little
This one?
free package from Efficiency Vermont, what they call it, the free energy savings kit. And if you can provide them with a residential account number, and you haven't gotten one in 3 years, you just call them or send them an email, and they'll send you out this kit. It's got 10 LED bulbs, which of itself are a lot more than, it says $32. 10 LED bulbs are a lot more than that right nowadays. Low-flow shower head, and some what they call faucet aerators, which are just reducing flow but still giving you some pressure. And then lastly, we're working again 3 or 4 other towns together to put together an energy fair on April 22nd, which is the other little notification in there. And we're going to be having, it's going to be at Manchester Town Hall. That's Earth Day, the 22nd, from 11 to 3. You'll be seeing these posters out, or this is a draft of something like this for the next few weeks. We're going to be having information about audits, home energy audits, cold climate heat pumps for thermal and water, solar and wind energy discussions, more information on the different rebates and tax incentives that are available, some segments on plastic and zero waste, and also on regenerative agriculture as it relates to carbon sequestration. So there'll be some tables with that in the hallway, and then we're going to have 6 or 7 presentations, which when you see the poster, you'll see them down the side. So that's what we've been up to. If you have any questions, I'm glad to try.
and on the burp municipal energy, Rob was giving a hand with the application and stuff, giving a hand, he's
Doing it.
doing it.
Well, that's great.
Okay.
Sound like some really great projects. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I would say that if, first of all, obviously, we kind of work for you or for the town. Not that it's work, it's kind of fun for most of us. But if you do have any other suggestions of stuff you would want us to work on, we're glad to hear about it. Or anybody wants to join the committee, another one, we'll gladly accept.
Or, doing some windows or volunteering for a shift or two.
Yeah, I
or
can
something
see
is
5
kind of fun.
excellent window dresser
Yeah, absolutely.
team members there.
But it's also actually really good throughout the year. Keep in mind stuff like with window dressers. become aware of somebody in town who's
Who might
struggling,
need it.
who
Right.
needs it.
Yeah.
Because honestly, one of the tough things we had was, we had a goal of having like 30% to be covered by grants, and that was one of the toughest things is to fill that up. We probably were more like 25 last year or so.
The first year we, it's the first year we did this, I got a grant from a local organization for $5,000. We spent $900 of it.
Yep.
Had to give back $4,100.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks
Jim.
so much,
Thanks,
Jim.
Jim.
Okay. So, review the board appointments. Do you have a list of them in here?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right after the minutes. It's just the one pager.
We good? There you go.
Oh, perfect. Oh, there I see. Okay. It's here. I've got it.
Nothing really actionable, it's just a heads up that, basically the April and May are the expiring term months
Mhm.
for board members. So the next step is we usually shoot an email to everybody just to see if they're willing to continue on. And then advertise for any vacancies that we do have, two vacancies, one vacancy and one upcoming vacancy in the BCRC rep. Nancy Fazy's not gonna renew. So-
Can you
Go ahead.
describe, Rob, can you describe what the BCRC is looking for in that position? Is it just somebody to represent the town?
Yeah, so the BCRC basically is, there's a governing board of representatives from each community that basically make up the kind of decision-making, voting block for the organization. And that's what these two, reps essentially do. So they represent Dorset at the BCRC, kind of operational meetings and kind of decision-making process for the organization.
Just pretty much monthly-ish, or every other month, here and there.
Yeah, monthly / important ones, kind of quarterly. So,
And those are down in Bennington.
they're all over, actually, they're all over Bennington County.
Okay.
So they can be, Manchester, they can be Bennington, they can, sometimes they're Dorset. And Jim's right, it's probably bi-monthly is a closer description, because they typically don't meet, every month. And it is it's an interesting, position, I think, because you're kind of out, it's not just Dorset specific, you're seeing kind of what's going on in the county, and what the BCRC is kind of working on as an entity.
So we need one person.
Two, we'll need once, so we have a vacancy in the 2024
Right.
board seat, and then Nancy Fazy's gonna not renew her seat, which is the 2023 seat, so we'll have two vacancies there.
Okay.
And then the only other one that we know of right now is Tuck Rawls on the ZBA, is not gonna renew his term.
Okay.
I haven't heard from anybody else, but we'll send, like I said, we'll send a kind of a courtesy email just to confirm that they'd like to continue.
Right.
If not, then we could advertise for anything else that opens up with the BCRC and the ZBA position. The ZBA position is posted on the website already, I think.
Okay.
Do we keep both the ZBA and the DRB with the new zoning?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we haven't, that's a good question, Frank. We, yes,
Okay.
right now, yes. I think that the way that zoning document is written, though, is that it lends itself more to the modernization of the boards. I mean, it's putting more onto the PC, which in theory would in other communities is the development review.
Right.
In our case, DRB is just design review. But the ZBA in the DRB, the development review model, the ZBA goes away essentially.
So I know Kevin O'Toole has approached me a couple of times saying, hey, can we reduce the number of the zoning board from 9 to 7. And what I told them was say, okay, you should put this in writing, you know, write it to the Board of Selectmen, and so that then we have kind of an official request to do that, at least from the zoning board of adjustment.
Where does it state that it has to be 9?
I'd say it's a Barlow question. It's a Barlow question. I
Town
don't,
of bylaws or something?
I don't know.
I've never seen it enumerated.
Organizational document.
I think it's just when they created it, it was 9. But it's a Barlow question. I'm pretty sure the select board can choose to change the number.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we just need
As
to make sure
you see
because
fit. I don't think that
it could
there's
be easy. But
And
we
in
just
that
need to
case,
make
if
sure
you go
we
to
have the
7,
authority.
then if you go to 7, you wouldn't have, you
Exactly.
wouldn't have to fill
Right.
any vacancies.
There's gotta be some document that would just say, you know, cause a not-for-profit would have it in its bylaws.
Right,
What they
exactly.
would have been. There's gotta be something like that.
I mean, there's reference to the zoning board in the actual bylaw document, but no.
But
nothing
not
that says-
statute, not
Nothing that
statute.
says, no, I'm talking, in our
In the zoning regs.
zoning regs,
Okay.
it references there shall be a zoning board, but it doesn't.
It doesn't specify how many people. Okay.
But I can get a memo from Barlow on that.
Yeah.
I think that'd be good.
Probably just an email. So 9 to 7.
And then the planning commission obviously has 3. So we need to reach out to them.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what Gay says.
Mhm.
Another 4-year term? You kidding me?
Yeah, I think there's, you might get them to stay on for the.
Are their terms 4 years? Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
4-year terms, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, she could always quit whenever she wanted.
Yeah, might get them to kind of hang through the bylaw
Yeah.
Yeah.
process and then get on it.
Okay.
That's it on that.
All right. Yeah, so we have town meeting recap.
So I've got a really short one-pager, just kind of summarizing the town budget passed, nonprofit articles passed. As you recall, we had the discussion about changing the petitioning process, so we can craft a letter for basically July 1 when the appropriations go out. You can send a letter with it too that says if you're over, I think the $2,500 number, you need to petition, annually. And then I had a question here about for the stuff that.
And how many signatures is that petition?
It's 5% of the voter checklist, so
5%.
so roughly 80 to 100 people, roughly. And that's kind of the, I guess, the pound of flesh for being on
On the high end of the requests.
well, yeah, and it's for being considered for
And
appropriation.
it's good if you're gonna have a bigger amount that you have to go
Exactly,
out
yeah.
and see people and.
So the question I had was for the ones that are over the 2,500, do you want to put them on Australian ballot, or do you want them to remain on the floor like everything else? That's kind of the other.
One thought I had during the meeting was that out of all those things, we had one person say no on one thing. But I was looking through the previous minutes from the last town meeting, just seeing how the vote ended up when it wasn't floor vote. And there were, not a lot of no's, but there were no's. And I just wonder if people who don't want to vote no in front of their friends and neighbors for things, for the larger ones, if it's worth doing it on Australian ballot.
The only downside I see is that you can't change it. Like I want to speak to the VNA hospice appropriation, and it's $40,000, and if it was on the floor, we could change it to 20,000 or 10,000 or whatever.
Yeah, there
we
was a
wanted.
debate
Right.
about the number, right?
Yeah. Whereas we
If
couldn't
it's
do that.
Australian, yeah.
It's
Right.
Australian.
It's up or down.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Yeah, because so many of our appropriations have been just sort of grandfathered in, and so there's certain amounts that have been requested, and some organizations may be doing better than when they first started, and other organizations may need help, so that number is just flat.
It's one of the really tough things because, there are organizations that need the extra money, and that's a factor. But then there's also just like VNA and hospice, they're a very large organization, and they do a heck of a lot for a lot of people here, so, you end up thinking, I'm not sure whether they need the money, but then they're, like I was talking with GNAT, that, currently they thought part of their funding was gonna go away, which made them very nervous. That hasn't happened yet, so, because I said, okay, you guys don't ask for very much on the, for any of the towns, and they said, well, we don't need it right now. And, so I think, it's awkward because there's some clearly Northshire Day School, or, they needed to fill some gaps. But then, that
Becomes
raises
standard.
other issues.
Becomes standard.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that the amounts, because of the way it's been done in the past, after it happened for 3 years, it was just kind of grandfathered in on that amount, and there's never been any adjustment like, gosh, we did really well with our fundraising and we need a little bit less this year. It's just sort of like, let's not rock the boat.
Well, we've talked about process before, and part of the process could even be, just essentially a questionnaire, and the select board just review. It's, okay, you asking for money because you need money to, or you, what, I don't know. You don't want to make it too difficult, but at the same time, clearly, the townspeople, I think you're right, there's a tendency to feel very uncomfortable not saying no to anything.
Exactly.
Because you feel like the big bad person is trying to get in the way, but I think there are a lot of people who are uncomfortable with, gets to be a large amount of money.
Right, well, and it adds to our tax bill, for people, and I don't think there's anything on there that's not a good service, but there are lots of other good services as well, and the question is not, do you want to support it, but do you want to support it to that extent?
Right.
And that's why I think when we're talking about those large requests,
That's where it struck me
it's
with
just
GNAT,
worth.
when, they're like, we aren't asking for more because we don't need more right now. It's like, that's, I love
a nice
that answer.
mentality.
Yeah, and then you have Roger Squire coming up and saying, well, I'm gonna need $55,000 next year for the sidewalk up Mad Tom Road.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
But,
where's-
and there are, issues like VNA and hospice, I look at their number and I say it's a big number, but I know they do a heck of a lot for us.
Yeah,
But
do they?
my big problem with it is the bigger town down the street,
Gives only $10,000.
$10,000, so we're basically funding a
Yeah.
quarter of their
Yeah, Manchester.
budget for all
10,000.
Bennington and Rutland counties is coming from Dorset.
Yeah.
And that seems out of whack.
that's the
It's not that
problem.
they're not spending some of the monies on our residents, and so that is perfectly fine, but that 40,000 is also going to support other towns.
It's inconsistent. That's where I'm saying that maybe some more due diligence on the part of, by the select board, essentially asking some questions.
Well, that number goes back to when the entity was different too, and so.
Dorset Nursing.
It
Dorset
was
Nursing Association.
entirely
The
Dorset.
number's been there for quite a while,
Yeah.
and it was more, I think it was more, I don't know that it was still completely local at that point, but I think it had just, the partnership with Rabna and Rutland had just.
But they also got the
started.
building when they bailed out Dorset Nursing. I understand. I don't know whether that's a fair.
I think that it was merged, for operational purposes, so that
Dorset
they
was
could
going to have a
continue to
hard
give
time
services.
continuing to exist.
Yeah.
Do they have other buildings in this region?
Yeah.
Do they have a Manchester building?
Yeah.
What is it?
Manchester Health Services, that's their building now.
Okay. I mean, they only service 57 individuals out of almost 4,000. So that's a little more than 1%
Yeah.
of, and we're giving,
That's a
from a
big
town
number.
standpoint, we're giving 18% of the money.
That's a good one. It's
So anyways,
definitely
just-
not equitable. at this
Just
point.
for
No.
future, like I was thinking maybe we should just reach out to Sarah and Dan and say, hey, would you consider cutting it to 20,000 next year? because otherwise we're gonna.
They're
I think it'd be
really,
Manchester.
I've had some dealings with them, they're really nice people.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to have a conversation.
Yeah, because it's not a matter of not supporting them, it's just that that's a huge chunk of our taxpayers' money
Yeah,
for.
I'd rather put in sidewalks.
Don't knock the sidewalks, that's also important.
That's
For
what
our
I'm
town.
saying, yeah.
Another option too is for things that, like the rescue squad. That's a public safety item and it's embedded into the town budget because it's the board and the town has always thought that that's a need.
Mhm.
There's a meeting next week on that, by the way.
So that's the other piece is that, reviewing some of these items to see where they fall in the services that are provided.
I was just
Right.
gonna say, what kind
And
of
if it's critical
what
enough
is
that
kind
it
of-
could be just
Especially
something that
last
the
year.
town covers, that's another thing
Yeah,
Mhm.
to consider.
yeah, that's
But still that,
Actually, could find out
oh, I'm
and
sorry,
get in there.
Henry,
Yeah, I'm not
that number just
necessarily
seems.
saying that one, but
Right.
others, maybe others.
Yeah, I mean, because I do agree
Oh,
that,
yes.
most of
We'll
those
check that.
entities don't
Okay.
don't ask for that much money. But then there are just a few that, like this number is quite large. So, yeah, so to your point about the Australian ballot, Frank, that's tough because people just walk in and they just go, yes, yes,
Right,
yes.
yes or no.
And I think most of them think that the select board has approved everything, and
Yeah.
that's why we're asking, and in fact, we have no say. Legally, they just come up with a petition, and then we're required to put it on the ballot. So I think keeping it on the floor at
Yeah.
least allows the opportunity for debate.
Mhm.
Only thing you can really do is require the petition or not.
Right.
But I think that, it's been really good that, people are asked to speak to
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
each time. I think that's.
I thought it was really helpful.
that- Yeah.
Yeah, it's just for those large sums, it would be nice if they spoke to the specific number and
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Most of them are fairly self-explanatory, but this is a bit. Anyway, was there anything else you wanted to talk about, Henry, or does that pretty much,
That was it,
that was,
as far as the town meeting
yep,
goes.
yep, because it would be curious to
We-
see what all the other towns give to
Mm.
VNA.
Just as we had a school board meeting and talked about that annual meeting. And one of the things that came up with, we were kind of bemoaning the fact that it used to be nice when each town had select board and school board together, and we kind of
Mhm.
lost something with that.
Yep.
And there was a suggestion, at least because we had relatively little attendance at, this year we had the Taconic and Green meeting at Courier, and we moved around from place to place, but not getting that many people. And the thought was that, a school board, TNG school board member from, the town, each town should probably, say something
Speak.
and speak about the school district at the
Town meeting,
town meeting.
which I think would make sense.
Okay.
I thought we had pretty good turnout, really.
Yeah, we had a good
We
turnout.
had-
A lot better turnout for the town meeting than for the
We're,
school board.
on the edge of like 75,
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And there was 30 plus on either side of the, so yeah, I think to your point, Jim, it's a good forum for it, you've got people there.
I think that Taconic and Green would like to make that a practice if it works for.
Yeah, just like Mike Rice came and gave a talk about,
Yep.
what's going on, it would be good to just make people feel a part of it, know what they're doing. So many of our tax dollars go there.
There is that one other issue, Article 22, about the housing task force.
Mm-hmm.
How do we want to go forward? And I already know of a volunteer, so
Great.
not me.
Was it Rob?
No.
Was it Jim?
It was Jim.
Frank?
No, it wasn't me. But actually, we had one, one came up. Was it
I
Ellen?
think my basic question is,
Ellen, I
do you want
think
me
so.
to, if there's names, do you want me to reach out to folks, or do we wanna?
Well, I know Dave McEnany is the person
Ellen Maloney asked about it. Yes, we had a,
There were a couple of names that came to my mind,
Yeah,
but I
I'm sure
would
Liz
wanna-
wants to participate.
I would wanna talk to them first, because there were some people that were involved in, the earlier study on Raptor Lane. And there were one or two people that.
Craig may be interested in doing that as well. She was.
Yeah,
she-
and the other thing that, and Liz had shared the VCRD group, there was actually a housing group that never really got to get off the ground because of COVID, but that's another, it's another resource for names.
Yep.
There's a handful of people there that I think are some of them are probably the same names that you guys are
Mhm.
thinking of.
Yeah, and I actually reviewed that whole report this afternoon. That was some good work that we did in 2019. But there is a lot of stuff in that report, not just the findings, but also the people that, the resources, the state resources, the people that were made available to the various committees that we worked on, and the community members who joined in the working group.
Do you think it makes sense to?
Which Cragen was in,
Yeah.
was part of that.
I was just thinking whether it makes sense and whether Liz would be willing to kind of, try to do some and work with Rob on the organizational sort of trying to get. I think it would be really good to look at everybody who was on that housing committee and
Mhm.
maybe reach out to them and just start to get something organized. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think we should put, something in the weekly email and put it on the website that this passed and ask for volunteers for people who haven't been involved before,
Yeah.
Yep.
wanna get involved now.
And then if any of us have names that come to mind, shoot them into Rob so that we can have it. But some people, it's always good to reach out to them first.
So I'm not saying yes to anything new anyway.
I would be more
It's
than
at the top of my
happy.
list.
That's what I said.
Um,
Liz just volunteered.
Great, thanks
Yep.
for this.
So I would be more than happy to kind of take a look at that and get the band back together, so to speak, see who's still interested, think about how we're 4 years later now. And yeah,
Do you want us to come with
that's what we want to do.
a list of people for the next meeting, maybe?
I think that would be helpful. I think it would also be helpful for us to think of like what a good number is, because if it gets too unwieldy, then nothing's gonna get done either, so.
Yeah.
I don't think it should just be open-ended. You can't have meetings with 15 people and get anything done.
Right. It's freaky to think that was 4 years ago. But often if you start with 20, then by the third meeting, it'll be 10 people.
I still think it's good to
Yeah.
pare down and be targeted.
You're right.
Um,
It's gotta be
because
single digit.
Otherwise, you really, if it's just random people that maybe don't have a lot of background, like anybody who has a little bit of skill or skill set in the area, whether it's, financial or this or that, then it's good to have a group of people because you can move things forward.
But I think a little bigger doesn't hurt, because it also becomes a way to reach out to the rest of the community. So you probably also wanna have people who don't just have skills, but they also have a big network of
6 to
folks they
8,
can reach out to.
6 to 10.
6 to 10.
Yeah.
I think when you get beyond 10, it just is.
I'm on boards with 22, so.
Yeah, and 22 is, if you're on boards with 22, you should know 22 is not a good number.
It's a little cumbersome.
I think it would take quite a bit of arm wrestling to get 22 people
Exactly.
to volunteer. So 6 to 10, okay.
I think the other thing is, putting together a committee for the committee's sake is helpful, but also putting some thought sooner than later into what the objectives are, what a scope of work would be, what the strategies are, would also help us to shape the committee, because it is 4 years later and the conversation about the issue has only compounded in all sorts of ways, and some of the players have changed, but some of the folks that we were actually working with in 2019 would still be really, really helpful to be able to get back in touch with, like the folks from VHCB and some of the housing authority folks. But their towns are in obviously different places of readiness and exploration, but a lot of people are also doing this work. So kind of finding out, there's for instance, next week I am going up to Bristol, Vermont to have a site visit at Bristol Works, which is I'm doing it for food stuff. It's an old 5-acre factory place that is now doing a lot of different kinds of renewable energy projects, food projects, but they also have this very interesting co-housing project that they've worked on that has just opened, which is kind of very much in the spirit of what we were first talking about Raptor Lane about kind of a community of private homes, but with a number of different shared services. So I think also just kind of finding out, who's doing it, and seeing what we can, learn from them and with them.
Yeah, just thinking that with the, with the housing study, just the housing needs assessment just coming out, that, really kind of trying to translate that from, okay, the needs assessment to what avenues should we be looking at to potentially, that's a great base document for that group to start working with.
Mm-hmm.
It would seem, start figuring out strategies.
Okay, anything else?
I had one thing, kind of food for thought, that struck me being on the select board table this time, was that at town meeting, everyone comes up and they're facing us and they're explaining to us, but we're not approving them. It's all these, they're asking for these requisitions. So I don't know if maybe we wanna just change the layout. Let's say, have the podium over here so that if you're speaking, you're not doing this awkward thing.
Yep.
And that just seems more like the spirit of what we're trying to get at, is you're asking the townsfolk for these appropriations.
Right, so they should.
I don't know if they've tried that before and it failed, but it just occurred to me.
I don't think they've ever tried it. I think the reason why usually they put it in the middle has just been for convenience, because when people have questions,
Right.
it's kind of centrally located. But I agree, it's very strange because people are facing us and they're not facing others. And if you're gonna ask for money from people, you might as well
Right.
be facing them.
Yeah, so, maybe
Yeah.
we could play with it.
It's
Yeah.
interesting too.
Closer.
A lot of times the speakers actually move, they turn.
Right, and they're kind of doing this.
Because it's awkward, you've got your back
Right.
to everyone.
Exactly.
And those are the people you're really speaking to.
Right,
Or we could sit in the very back of
yeah,
them.
that'd be great too.
I love that idea.
But I think that's actually a really good point, Frank, because I agree, it's very
It
awkward.
just seems awkward to me, and I
And-
never really noticed till I don't know,
Yeah.
till this meeting, it really stood out to me.
Yeah, and it is peculiar because then they're giving an argument and it, I think, would generate perhaps more conversation if they
Right.
were looking at the people
Yeah.
they were speaking to, because it's less anonymous.
We
Okay.
do some research on it.
Yeah,
Great.
I mean, it might mean we have to either have 2 mics or have
Right.
one that we move
Right.
during appropriations.
And where would the camera go to make sure?
Right,
we get
to film
everything?
it, I
Right.
know,
Well,
it's
they
just
could.
all those things.
Post-COVID, they could go up to essentially a moderator spot to ask questions, and then people could ask them questions from the central mic.
Mhm. Or we could just have them have their backs to us and speak
Yeah.
out to the camera and to all
Right.
the
Yeah.
townspeople.
Yep.
Okay, anything else for town meeting?
That's a good point, Frank.
Yeah.
Thanks for raising
Right.
that.
All right, I'm going now.
You're done. You had your good point for
Going
the
out on a
night.
high note.
Okay, the Vermont Trans Highway forms.
Alright, in the packet, the first one is just the annual, financial plan, that shows the amount of, the money, that comes in from the state and the money that we spend locally. And when you divide that up, it comes to a lot more than $300 per mile. But we have to verify to them that we're raising at least $300 per mile locally, to be eligible for state funding.
Mhm.
So that's the first one, and then the second one,
But are those rates for the class 2, class 3? That's the state money we got for,
correct.
and that's just that's the rate, that 1385 per or whatever. Is there the miles?
Those are the miles, those are the amount of miles.
Okay.
So, 13.85.
So for class 2, do we get a certain amount per mile? Is
Yeah.
that- Yeah, okay.
Yeah, if you divide the 60,792 into the 13.8, it'll tell you how much.
Okay.
And then on the second page there, the certification for the $300, that's in statute. That says in order to be eligible for the state funding, you've got to spend $300 per mile yourself.
Okay.
And are we authorizing you to sign these on behalf of the town?
No, I've got one that I'll pass around for you guys
Oh, well signed.
to actually sign. And the second one
Road and bridges?
is the road and bridge standards for 2023. And there's no changes to this from last year. So. those are the
Okay.
two.
So you need a motion to approve
Be good to put it in the minutes. Yeah.
each of these documents?
Just curious here.
Mhm.
It says roadway construction standards, new or substantially reconstructed, 6 inches thick gravel subbase, additional 6 top, new or substantially, well. So just curious about our one favored road.
What is, because it looks like, they've got a lot more material than that in there, I think, but,
Does this make sense?
We're talking about Coolidge.
Yeah,
That's a class 4, so.
no, just looking at, so gravel roads, they should have 6-inch thick gravel subbase with an additional 6-inch. I guess that differs on if it's a slope, if it's whatever,
Yeah, and it's the spec is meant for new construction, so it's regular. We don't do much new construction, so
Yeah.
it doesn't really come up very much. But typically, with a newly constructed gravel road, that's what you're looking at, like geotextile fabric, and then
That's
Yeah.
their problem, they don't get
Yeah.
fabric. under
some.
the road.
That's the problem.
Really, it's probably some like
Okay.
large diameter base stone
Should that be
fabric,
layered or
and then
something?
2 courses of.
It should
gravel.
be, some kind of stabilization fabric and then, 18 inches, but to do it that way, to dig all that out, put it back there, you could never afford it.
Interesting. Okay, so did we have a motion to approve?
I move.
One motion for both, right?
Yeah, that's fine. The financial plan and then the road and bridge standards is fine.
Okay, so motion to approve the financial plan.
I'll make the motion.
Nope, well, second.
Okay, all in favor, say
You
aye.
made the motion.
Oh, he did make the motion.
Yep.
Oh,
I will remake your
For
motion.
town highways.
Thank you.
okay.
Sorry.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
it's Russian then.
getting it together there.
And I'm gonna
Motion.
send it around to be signed.
Yep, do you have an extra pen?
And then a motion to approve the town road and bridge standards for our little town of Dorset.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Alright. You want me to write the date in here?
Aye.
Sure.
It's the 21st. Oops,
Good
more?
specifications. Yeah. Just- Well, they're state standards, so makes sense.
Yeah, the road standards are more or less, they qualified all the grant funding on having those.
Makes sense.
Not only grant funding, but FEMA.
The second one, did you do both? Yeah, I wonder how you store those to keep them safe during winter. I'm doing the same.
I already
Those-
know.
To tell you the truth, well, if you put them in the winter, in the summer, if you do any any windows that you don't normally open in the summer, just leave them in. Ends
We
up
open all our
keeping it-
windows?
Yeah.
And we put fans in them?
Yeah, because then they do suggest that, you don't need them in a
Box.
temperature, or anything, but it's actually best to like just, stack them and put a cloth or something, put
Yep.
something over them.
Okay, old business?
Sure, I'll just try to hit the highlights here. I had a meeting, I think last week with McClay, Naylor and Green, confirming their updated estimate and the process, which is good. So it's finally kind of the two groups are kind of coalescing. So the McClay is starting their, not starting, they're working through their process of construction design. And I'm told that permitting should start to take place at the town level sometime between April and June. So we do have to get a site plan approved by the planning commission, and then water, wastewater, and stormwater permits in advance. So that'll happen then. Design April to August, bidding, pricing September to December. Possibly some site work in the winter, but really for all intents and purposes, a 2024 spring start.
Mm-hmm.
And we did talk about, the possibility of purchasing or ordering certain packages of materials ahead of time. Like when we get to the point where they price stuff out, it seems like everything's going to jive numbers wise. So then, maybe something like the HVAC stuff to kind of lock in and purchase that, because it's a significant, it's tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars for materials. So
Right.
To try to avoid a 2024
Everything,
January
yep.
pricing.
But would we have to take
change.
delivery if we ordered it?
Delivery is usually months and months out anyway, but yeah. But we'd have to work with Naylor and Green to figure out where,
They could
if it shows up physically, where is it gonna go? And they offered to help us figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And when is McClay also, they'll have to determine sort of what the interiors are gonna be, right? Or is that gonna be factored in later in terms of, like,
yeah, no,
cupboards and
my
doors?
understanding is that there's gonna be an exercise with us and staff about, here's this work area, here's the prescribed furniture.
right,
What do you like, what do you don't like? Kind of like with Sandy, there'll be a process by which to go through the vault.
Mhm.
What does the vault design look like? What can we reuse from here? What do we have to add to it? All that stuff.
okay.
And I'm not sure where that'll fall in the
Mhm.
time frame, but I'm assuming it's probably gonna be sometime this summer, probably.
Yep, yeah, because they were talking about different kinds of wood finishes and,
Yep.
beams and stuff like that, which would have a big impact on the cost, so we just need to make sure that we're on top of that.
Yeah, so I assume we'll get, as the permitting starts to happen, it'll be more and more real.
Mm-hmm.
So, East Dorset Village, there's no real change there. We lost our solar panel on our speed sign to the north, but it's still, still wired in, so it's still functioning. The wind and snow.
Yeah.
Actually, the solar panel, the steel bracket was just it's completely ruined. I mean, just the salt is just eating it. It's
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's like 3 feet from the road. Reed Farm Lane, so we've got a signed easement for one of the 3 properties that we need to get easements for in order to do the in-stream work. I'm hoping that the Hull Chalmers permit easements can be signed this week. And then we do have to get a permit from the Forest Service, which I'm hoping that I don't have to call Bernie Sanders to rattle their cage, but it may come to that. So, we'll see. And then the second part of that is that appraisals are kind of forthcoming for real estate and business value, which will set the universe for what the funding might be for the buyout.
Mm-hmm.
And once that's done, we've got to clear that with the state, and then in theory after that we can kind of essentially once the state approves it, then we would be able to craft up actually probably a purchase and sale agreement, that would execute the process. Raptor Lane, there's not, I think we kind of talked about this last time, but we're working through some kind of signage and amenity type discussions, and then just also some kind of growing pains about parking and upper and lower, and it's, when everything's on a hillside, you have to go up the hillside to get to it. So it's
Right.
like, it's we're trying to make it as convenient as possible, but it's not easy. But the good news is people are using it. So it's Coolidge Lane. I've got some work to do to get in touch with the property owners there and to try to get some actionable items back to the board on that. And the sheriff stuff I've kind of already talked about too, but Jason continues to do a pretty good job. So
Seen him around multiple places too. Good.
yeah, he's done a really good job with direct patrols on the road, and then a pretty good job with making connections with schools and going to school events and stuff like that. And them, not them requesting him to be at school events, which is always nice.
Yeah, I've had a couple close calls.
Oh, yeah?
Well, I'll get you paying attention to those old speed limits, yeah.
Yep. So we'll have him ready for Route 30 in the spring when our snowbirds come back. That's it for old business.
Okay. Finance report?
Delinquent taxes, good news that that 18025 number, you can reduce that by like 33,000.
Oh, that's good.
Just happened this week, and this is the old delinquent info. It doesn't contemplate the year that just barely ended last week. But that actually does put us ahead of schedule.
So now it's 88,000?
Yeah, it was like 118 minus just a little under 33,000.
Wow, that's awesome.
So, which is good. And that was one that was like a 5 or 6 year delinquent account. So it's good to get that kind of
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So you had a large percentage of
off the book.
the taxes that just came in. You got a big percentage. Did we
I don't
do
think
well?
it's bigger than normal. Maybe a little bit, but not. Typically, it kind of goes in phases. Usually, when we do the delinquent warrant, it's about $500,000, 300 to 600,000. That's still outstanding. But usually that quickly whittles down to 100. So, and out of the 88 that remains in the old stuff, there's like 40 of that is one account. So,
Okay.
and then the other 40 is like numerous other accounts. Just to give you some perspective. As far as fiscal 23, 72% of the way through the year, 67% expended, but we are technically kind of right at or ahead of schedule expense-wise, because there's some large items in there like the bond payment, ramp up number. What else?
So just a question, 40,000 property for the delinquent taxes, is that also something that's been going on for multiple years?
Yeah. And they lived. That's actually, there's the one in question is where there was a fire actually recently.
Yeah, okay.
So that
Kent Hill.
That's what I was,
it's
Yeah.
probably going to run its course, because there's going to be, it may take a bit because there's insurance stuff, but ultimately that's going to get wrapped up in probably a new loan. And as what happened with the one that came in this week is that there was a refinance there. And there's no state statute that says you're required to pay delinquent taxes when you refinance. There should be, but there isn't. But a phone call from me to say, hey, like,
I would think
you're gonna
think the new lender.
you're gonna hold
the
the mortgage
lender
on
would-
this.
want to know
I
that.
can take it away
Yeah.
in 6 months if you don't, so typically they'll come in, they do the search, and that stuff comes up. So with that second one, hopefully that'll start to kind of, that process of the refinance will, solve all that. And then a lot of times when that happens, the banks will force an escrow, and then it's not really our problem anymore. The banks have to kind of deal with all that, which
Yep.
is really nice.
Yeah, because that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, so, and that typically, I would say since I've been here, there's probably like 5 or 6 that's kind of the cycle that they run through, that until it gets refied or sold, it'll just languish and
But
they'll get small payments.
They've been accruing the penalty interest
Correct,
the whole
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the one that just got paid
Yeah,
off.
it's crazy, huh?
The one that just got paid off, the interest on the oldest year was more than the principal.
Wow.
So like the principal was 6,000, the interest was like 6,200 or something like that, because it had been running
It's
for
been
so
that
long. Yeah, so it's not advisable to do that. And we don't, like I said, we try to be as reasonable as we can through the process.
And how do we book, do we end up, does the 118 include accrued interest?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the overall like what's owed number. So it does include the penalty and the interest. The penalty is one time,
Right.
goes on, and then the interest compounds on everything. So, and for the last month, not a whole lot of new or different expense. So that's pretty much it.
Okay.
I move we accept the finance report as presented.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Okay, managers report?
Home stretch. Highway, shout out to the guys for working basically 2 16-hour days.
Yeah, that's
Tuesday and
fun.
Wednesday of last week, more or less. So yeah, when the routes take about 4 hours, so when they get in the truck to leave and they go do their section, it takes about 4 hours, and when they do that 4 times in a day, they take breaks and stuff, but it's just,
Never ending.
Tuesday was tough. Tuesday it was really challenging conditions, and it was not like, that's one of those days where you shouldn't be really driving unless you have real reasons to be.
Yeah. But it seemed like, some of the, okay. Just, it always seems to me that when the snow's still coming down a fair amount, then they kind of,
Slow down.
then they take a little time off to let it fall and build and all, so
Yeah, I think,
I'm assuming they're getting some rest time in there, but.
they do. They start really, really early. I mean, like I think Tuesday they probably started at like 3 a.m. and then would have gone to 9, maybe 9, not quite 10ish. After 10, there's like nothing good happens after 10 o'clock. It's just. It's just late, nobody's on the road, a lot of times it gets really difficult to see, and all it takes is one person to get stuck, and then everybody else is,
Yep.
going to the rescue, so, but they do, it's about like I said, it's a 4-hour route that can include a stop to eat or go to the bathroom or whatnot, but it's pretty consistent once they go out. They can be slower than that. There might be bigger gaps in between seeing them, but they're still out there.
That was a 2 snow day event
Yeah.
in schools.
Yeah, those are pretty rare.
Yeah.
So, we're lucky. They continue to do the good work for us. And then, as far as this coming year, we've got some kind of grant application, small-y projects that we're kind of working through. Some culverts, a retaining wall up the street, stuff where we can probably do the work ourselves in kind, and the grant will pay us, back for both the materials, equipment, time, and labor. And then onto miscellaneous stuff. The fire district. Hopefully in early May, we're going to have an award letter from the state saying that they were approved for the $1 million grant from ACCD.
That's great.
Which would get their outside funding number up to 65% for that project that's going to start in May. Beyond that, some passive board meetings, which passive is the property and casualty insurance intermunicipal fund, which Dorset is a part of. The survey for Route 30, the scoping study, the survey's still out, so if you haven't taken it, just go on the website. It's really easy, just click it, follow through. It's like a 10-15 question thing. It takes 5 minutes. And I think we've got about 50 responses so far, which is good, but it'd be nice to have more.
Okay.
Grand list stuff for the end of this year is kind of coming together. Note here about the Vermont Tax Department, they're actually changing some of the interfacing, the way we get data to produce bills. So there's some trepidation on our part that it may delay our process, which I hope not. But we'll see. Talked about some of the other stuff. Planning Commission has continued I think they've got another working meeting on the bylaw. One of the reasons there's kind of not much at this select board meeting is we had held this open to potentially have a bylaw hearing here, but it's not quite ready for that yet. So I hear potentially May or June. And then the last bullet point here is I will be not in town on the 18th of April, which is the next regular date. So we could either move it, or I could
Do you know if that's school break that week?
prepare. It is.
Okay, because I probably won't be here that
It
week
is
either.
right in
At
the
least
teeth
I
of
know we're
break.
on part of that.
It's break week. Yeah.
How about if we push it back to the 25th, the following week? Does that work?
I'm bad on the 25th. I've got but yeah, I have to be
Okay.
out of town to VPIC meeting.
Could we do it on Monday, the 24th? Switch from a Tuesday. Could you do a Monday night?
That Monday I can. Yeah.
Monday? Good.
Sure.
Can we do it then?
The 24th?
Yep, Monday, the 24th.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
The rooms open.
Free, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nothing there.
Okay.
That is the only. We have other business liquor licenses somewhere, and this is the same. We don't have to sign them anymore, but I will. So it's
We need a motion to approve,
Yeah,
right?
H.N. Williams, Dorset Field Club, Church Street Hospitality. So which
cover
includes-
Dorset Inn and
Yeah,
Barrow's
which
House?
includes Barrow's House, Dorset
And
Inn,
Dorset Bakery.
and
Bakery.
Dorset Bakery.
Okay. Can we have a motion to approve the liquor licenses for those?
Make a motion to approve the stated liquor licenses.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. That's all we need to do?
Aye.
Yep. And then.
Did we need to call ourselves the?
Liquor board.
We didn't do that.
I can.
Put that
Is
in
it the
minutes.
consensus that you want me to put that
Yes.
in the minutes?
Yes, it is the consensus.
I will do that.
We, in our minds, we were the liquor board.
And then the last thing that I can kind of, just, it's here if you want to take a look at it, but the two things, I talked about this a while back, the state, when your CLA hits a certain number, you're required to reappraise. Right now, there's 165 of the 250 towns. So 165 are under a forced reappraisal order. And now the state, I think, is scratching their heads about, well, that's not possible, you're not gonna be able to do that, There isn't.
Aren't enough companies.
There's not, correct, there's not the staff to bring to bear to do that. So they're actually, they being the state, are looking at, I think, the potential of planning to have the state take over some kind of either admin part of that, or have some contract that with multiple firms or one firm, I don't know, we'll find out.
I know the legislature was talking about what they could do, but I have no clue
Yeah.
how that went.
Yeah, so it's just kind of a heads up. I mean, there's info in here from the Department of Taxes talking about, they're hiring a consultant this year or actually, it would be next fiscal year.
That'll make it a lot more efficient. Let's have more government involved.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and on the same face of it, though, a lot of communities are really struggling with losing their listers and not being able to make the transition to assessor like we have, because it's kind of the same thing. These people don't really do. They're part-time positions. Typically, most towns aren't going to want to put it up to be a full-time position. It's kind of the only way to potentially fill it. So potentially that's going to be lacking in a lot of communities, and that's what the state, I think, is partially concerned about as well. So there may be some more, mission creep, I guess, as far as the state is concerned. So just something to kind of be aware of. And then I think I mentioned this at some point, but if there was a statewide CLA, right now it would be 83.1. So it just means that most of the rest of the state is in a similar situation CLA-wise as Dorset is. So.
Yeah, 'cause we've had, just about, Manchester didn't have as much of a move, but almost all the 9 towns in Taconic and Green had a 10-point decline followed by a 10-point decline.
Which elevates the rate.
Yeah. If I could just give a quick, last meeting, I gave the concern about the legislation on schools and the independent schools. Happily can inform, it ain't over yet, the fat lady has not sung, but the House Education Committee, there was the bill with all this, all this momentum behind it to essentially say get rid of most of the independent schools or don't pay them tuition. The House Education Committee came up with an alternative approach, and I gotta give them a lot of credit. They worked hard on it to come up with, how do we better define their, doing kind of what we had been asking people to do is let's figure out what are the factors that schools should meet, or what are the requirements in order for them to get public monies. And they did a good job. It isn't perfect, but the House Education Committee passed out of committee to the full House, and it's probably on Thursday, tomorrow, it'll probably get taken up by the whole House. But it is now the direction things are going, which is a requirement. It's non-discrimination, specific requirements on non-discrimination and in employment plus with students. It is a requirement that it's moving things towards the law matching what the rules are that are set by the State Board of Education for what you need to be approved, an approved independent school. So it's a non-discrimination, it's special ed services. The thing that's the most sort of going to be discussed the most tomorrow probably on the House floor is they're trying to make it a lot clearer that if you want to get public dollars, then you can't be super picky about which kids you're taking. And that's where a lot of people are getting a little bit concerned. Personally, I think it's kind of a fair, way of looking at it, but they came up with this series of criteria. So those bills that said only the 4 historic academies would be able to get public tuition, that's basically been shoved aside for the moment.
Yeah, and it's interesting that that's the juxtaposition, Jim, too, because in my travels, I've never heard a story from like our local little independent school kind of world where kids are turned away. It's actually the opposite, that they're actually provided more suitable services.
Yeah,
than
it's
other places.
I have to say, I've been involved with this and paying a lot of attention to it. There are some valid gripes, but they're getting blown to the nth degree, up to the nth degree, and people who are there are a lot of people who just don't like the way it is and want it to change.
I'm just saying functionally,
And
that's not happening.
functionally-
It's the
Right.
opposite of that.
Well,
Exactly.
functionally, some of the concerns that, that were valid, but only, in a small number of cases are things like, some of the independent schools that act like BBA and all, where it's, kids get essentially expelled. And the LEA, meaning the supervisory, doesn't even know about it and is trying to, scramble to deal with it. Whereas, if it were in your public school you're operating, it's, you have an easier way of dealing with it. There are some beefs, but I've been, it's an interesting one because I'm on the School Board Association board and I'm on the absolute opposite, as a board member of the VSBA, I support what they're doing. As a Taconic and Green and Bennington Rutland Supervisory Union, I'm on the absolute opposite side.
So wearing that, and I've been very noisy on the opposite side.
But trying to say the whole time that, I'm not in my VSBA capacity.
Right, you're arguing with yourself.
But I even sent stuff into the legislature where I said, I'm on the VSBA board, but this isn't,
Yeah.
I'm not speaking with that hat on. But it's moving in a positive direction, so
Well, that's
I
good.
wanna let you guys know that.
Excellent. Anything else, any other new business?
Oh, one other thing I just mentioned is, Rob's invited, he's gonna be attending, and next week there is,
Oh, the
On
EMS?
Monday, the EMS, emergency services board.
which I can't actually make it that night, so. It'll be, Ben Weiss and Mike Alfano is a new board member, great guy. He's, and probably Morris Spivey, our president, will be there, but this is to discuss. And apparently the new town manager from
Scott.
is gonna be there as well. And, Dan Garceau from Danby. Derek Tinkin from Winhall. Probably Heidi Chamberlain. And I'm not sure who's about Mount Tabor, but, and anybody else is welcome to join the meeting.
Mhm.
I've got another meeting. But it's to discuss the new contract.
Yeah.
And the new contract is basically, the proposal is a 3-year contract with an evergreen renewal at the end.
Yep. Great. I'm planning on going to that.
Great, beautiful.
Put it on my calendar. Okay, anything else, guys?
Move to adjourn?
Did I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and next time it's gonna be Monday, the 24th.
Non-edition